If the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to trade up in the NFL draft, whether they get a quarterback or a star player at a different position, it's going to be costly. But the strategy of that is really interesting. I'm here, Chris Carter, here of the Locked On Steelers podcast, joined by Tony Serino. It's going to be a fun one talking about trade-up options and how the Steelers could do it and whether they should. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news updates. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. If you want to help us out, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a shout out at the end of the show. Joining me is Tony Serino of AFC North Talk, former co-host with me on this very show, Locked On Steelers. And Tony, we got a good one today. How you doing?
I'm feeling good. It's 3 weeks of Tony Tuesday. No, it's not.
No, you blew the streak. That's on you.
It's on me. It's E1. It's E1.
Could
Could have been a trade-up version of Tony Tuesday. I mean, the alliteration goes on forever.
trade up Tony Tuesday.
But it's man,
you messed it up.
It's a Willis. It's a Malik Willis.
Okay. You are just ruining the show right now.
All right.
We want to build the suspense. We want to build the suspense, and here you go messing it up. Anyways, so to be clear about what we're talking about today on the Locked On Steelers podcast, yesterday I had a show with Wes Euler, and we both agreed that after the Eagles-Saints trade, it's going to be a harder market for the Steelers to move up in because the Saints have 2 draft picks. If they want to move up, it's easier for them to do so if they hear that rumblings are going around about who's trying to get a quarterback. And they naturally just have 2 picks ahead of the Steelers. And they're a team that would definitely want a quarterback on top of the Detroit Lions, on top of the Houston Texans, on top of, you could say the Carolina Panthers, on top of I wouldn't rule out the Falcons, the Seahawks. There's a lot of teams that could make this a quarterback hungry market and could make this the quarterbacks fly off the board fast. But, and in our summation between me and Wes, we think it would not behoove the Steelers to trade up in this class to get a quarterback because they'll be competing with teams that have much more capital. And right now, the Steelers are not a team that's locked that's pretty solid across the board on their roster. They need to lock those down. But however, I am an open-minded person. I'm not saying that I know everything. I'm not saying that I'm always right about this stuff. This is just my intuition as far as how I've seen the Steelers and who I've talked to and what strategies might be in play for Pittsburgh. Tony, from what we've talked about off camera, you have a completely different opinion.
Way out, you guys are way off base yesterday. Never listened to a podcast I disagreed with more than the one you and Wes did yesterday. No, I am definitely team trade up. In fact, I'll say this. I think the only way the Steelers should take a quarterback in this class is if they move up and get them. Because I am Malik Willis no matter what. Malik Willis, and that's the only
Willis no matter what.
Yeah, from the great classic Draft Day. Which is the greatest movie ever made. I think we established that years ago during our. Remember?
I remember.
Friday.
I remember.
We all agreed. It was me, you, and Wes. Actually, we agreed that Draft Day is the greatest sports movie of all time.
Okay,
and I've taken a cue from that. Malik Willis, no matter what, we're going up to get him, Chris. We're going up to get our boy.
Long story short, we did like a fantasy draft thing on the show for two. We've done it for 2 years now. We'll bring it back after the draft and when we're through mini camp and stuff. But we did a sports movie draft, and this guy picked Draft Day first overall.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct because it is I couldn't let you guys have it. I mean, it was obvious it wasn't the obvious number one overall.
Gosh, back to the Steelers because I had to explain what the heck. The inside joke you were referencing for those who are new to the show or watching us on YouTube for the first time. But what will it take for the Steelers to move up? That's a big question. Yeah. Now, there's different charts out there about how it works for a trade, because that's an art that no one really has down to a science. Now, there are people who go through history, and if you go to draftek.com, and that's draftek.com, so draftek.com, they have a trade value chart that you can look up that assigns a point value to every single pick in this year's NFL draft. And in doing so, the idea is that if you want to trade for a higher pick, you have to take that pick from the team that you think is going to trade and add other picks that total up to the pick that you want to get, right? Because that's their system. So the Steelers on this system at 20th overall have 850 points assigned to that. Tony, how high up do you think the Steelers need to trade if they wanted to get one Malik Willis?
Okay, so you may have to go to one, which we're going to rule out going to one. They're not going to one.
Yeah, that's just too much.
But I mean, it's out there, right, that the Lions may take Malik Willis at 2, which makes this discussion null and void. I think, though, to be safe, you probably need to get to 7, right? Because as you talked about, who are the quarterback needy teams in this draft? It starts at 2 with Detroit, but we know the Steelers can't go any higher than 2. They're not going to go to 1, right? No. Houston, Davis Mills, we'll see. They could be, but I think the realistic ones are Carolina, Atlanta, Seattle, Washington, and then New Orleans. And then, of course, and then you also have the idea of anyone else kind of moving up in this draft. Tennessee wants to get a guy or something, for the future of Ryan Tannehill. So I think, to me, the most realistic spot is either you go to 7, you get ahead of Atlanta or Seattle, or you just hope, and you go, maybe we can't go to 7, we'll go to 10 instead. But I think 10 is like, what if Malik Willis gets to 10, they've done this before for Devin Bush, right? I mean, if the Steelers like Malik Willis as much as it has been reported that they like Malik Willis, quarterback is the most valuable position in the National Football League, far more valuable than an inside linebacker. So the Steelers have already shown a penchant to go up from 20 to 10. They did it like 4 years ago. So yeah, that to me, it's 7 or it's 10.
So if, according to this chart, let's say 10 to go along with the Devin Bush route there. The 10th overall pick belongs to the New York Jets, who don't need a quarterback, so that would work. They would be a team that'd probably be willing to trade back if they don't see their player that they really want there. But their pick is worth 1,300 points. So 1,300 minus 850 is 450, I believe, if I'm doing my math quick. Correct. Yeah. So 450 points. Now, to understand that, the second round pick the Steelers have in this system is worth 380 points. The third round pick the Steelers have is worth 170. The fourth round pick, the comp pick at 37 at 138th overall is worth 37 points. So you start to get to a complicated place where you're not sure, how, if you do this, you're most likely trading away this year's first, maybe a second, and some change. Now, there's also next year's picks, which I don't have right in front of me as far as their values, and that could be involved in it. But
generally, they're a little devalued. Yeah, they're a little devalued in the chart, obviously, because they're future picks.
They're future picks, and that's not the same. But point being, this would be a very aggressive move and a very costly move that if the Steelers go in on. This isn't the quarterback that they're trying out for the next 2 or 3 years.
No.
This is the franchise quarterback. This is the heir to Ben Roethlisberger. And I want to talk to Tony more to talk about the potential of that being the move, or is there another move that could be in play for trading up? We'll do that in just a sec. But first, I got to talk about Shady Rays. Shady Rays is a sunglass company, and it's an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. Shady Rays includes a lost and broken protection on every pair that will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happened. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays exclusively for our listeners. Head to ShadyRays.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, and you'll get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses, backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews at Shady Rays. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with my guest and friend, Tony Serino. Tony, again, if they're making this move to trade up to get Malik Willis, is there another quarterback that you would trade up for in the draft class, by the way?
No. To me, it's literally Malik Willis or bust. Yeah.
How do you even rank these quarterbacks?
To me, I have Malik Willis 1, and then there's a huge gap.
Okay.
Right? Malik Willis 1, gap, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, gap again, and then it's Corral and it's Sam Howell.
Wow, you and I have pretty similar. I think the only difference in our rankings is that I wouldn't say that much of a gap. I'd say gap, between Pickett and Willis. I mean, it wouldn't be gap. It would be gap. It would be short.
For me, I would.
Is it a Grand Canyon or is it?
It's a Grand Canyon. I'm not sure.
Disrespect, sir.
Because what I want out of a franchise, when we talk about like what do you want out of a quarterback, I want a franchise. I want the guy who I think is going to win me Super Bowl titles. Kenny Pickett is there's so many problems with him, and I don't like quarterbacks where one of the big assets of a quarterback is, well, he's got a really high floor. I don't care what your floor is. I don't know what your ceiling is, and I worry about Kenny Pickett's ceiling, and he's one of these high floor guys. I don't like high floor guys.
Hey, I've said all along, I've covered Kenny Pickett. I appreciate Kenny Pickett as a quarterback that I've studied over the years covering Pitt football, but there's no doubt that his arm strength is a liability. In the NFL, you don't want that kind of a liability in your quarterback of the future. So I agree in that assessment here. But allow me to entertain you with this. What if the trade up isn't for a quarterback? What if it's for a Kyle Hamilton, who, by the way, Aditi Kinkawala mentioned on Tuesday that the Steelers would be looking at him for a visit this week. Jordan Davis is also one of the guys. Now, Mike Tomlin indicated when he was talking about Jordan Davis at the Georgia Pro Day a few weeks ago that when asked about it, would you guys be willing to take him? And he said that guy's going to be hugging Roger Goodell long before we pick. And so that's but see, and that to me is that Mike Tomlin basically letting out a little bit, saying that we're not trading up this year and this isn't part of the deal? Because here's the other thing: if it's long before they pick, Tony, reading between the lines there, that means they didn't trade up at all, because that means they wouldn't have gotten Malik Willis.
And that scares me. Look, that scares me to no end, because I do worry. In fact, I'm about to start a support group, Chris, because I worry. Yeah, a support group for all of us Steeler fans who as of April, whatever it is, 29th, they're going to have to listen to, after 4 quarterbacks are already off the board, the Steelers stay pat at 20, and it's like the Pittsburgh Steelers with the 20th selection have taken Sam Howell, quarterback out of North Carolina, and it's like, it's
not sign me up for that support group with that.
Yeah, no one wants, I think the worry I have about the Steelers in this class is that on their little post-it note, it says quarterback no matter what, and that they're willing to stay at 20. Kevin Colbert said about this class, there are going to be multiple starters at quarterback coming out of this class. I don't even know if I agree with that. I mean, again, I'm Malik Willis, as like 1A in this class, and everyone else I have huge question marks about. But if they really do feel like, that there are 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in this class that they all feel like could be that guy, and they're willing to just say, we'll wait till 20 and we'll take whatever one's left over, to me, that's bad process. And that's what worries me about, where the Steelers are headed in here in a couple of weeks.
That's certainly interesting. Now, I'm going to take a second to look at it as an example for how things could play out here as far as how these picks now. A lot of people have Aiden Hutchinson going first overall to the Jaguars. The Jaguars, I do think, are picking either an offensive tackle or an edge rushers, and neither of those positions are things that the Steelers should be concerning themselves with in the first round this year.
Right.
But this is Trevor Sakema, by the way, mock draft from Pro Football Focus. Trevor Sakema, also a guy who's been with the Draft Network. He's been with Locked On. He's one of them dudes that I've had a lot of respect for over the years.
He works for an unfortunate organization these days. But
these days, PFF do be laying some nonsense out there. But I trust Trevor with his analysis and everything. I just thought this was interesting. But at 6th overall with the Carolina Panthers, he goes with Charles Cross instead of a quarterback. And that's where things start to get interesting. It's like, okay, well, if the Panthers aren't going, the Falcons are going quarterback. No, he has the Falcons going Garrett Wilson. Well, then what about the Seahawks? Because they have Drew Lock. They have Kayvon Thibodeau. And then you're through pick 10, and no quarterback's been taken. And then the first quarterback that he has being selected in this year's NFL draft is indeed Malik Willis at 20th overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sorry.
I would cry real tears of joy. I would cry real tears.
If they were now, here's one thing. I'm telling you right now, I've been saying I wouldn't do it this year. I don't know. If Malik Willis falls to 20, different story, y'all. I'm like, okay, that's worth it. A first round pick that you aren't going to pay nothing extra for, right? And that's your number one dude. Go get him. And I agree with that assessment. But the question is that a reality? I mean, the question, no one will know if this is a reality until draft night happens itself. There's so many times we think, oh, yeah, this guy's going first overall, or this guy's going top 10, and he'll fall into the third round, or this guy's going in the third round, he goes top. Cleveland Farrell is a great example. No one thought that guy was going in the top 10, and the Raiders did that. But yeah, your point.
No, I was going to say, well, the guy that's happening to right now, right? We keep talking about, well, Willis could fall or he could go top 10. Right now, the guy who has been consistently top five is the guy you mentioned, Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
And he was top 5 in every mock draft. Then all of a sudden, we get to this part of the season. I talked about this on AFC North Talk a little bit. We get to this part of the season where all of a sudden mock drafts just start changing for no reason. Right? It's like, what happened? Why is all of a sudden Kyle Hamilton was top 5 in every mock draft I looked at? Now today, he's 7th. He's 8th. He's 10th. He's falling to 12 now. And it's because, what happens during this part is these media guys start talking to some of the scouts out there. And the scouts tell them, Kyle Hamilton on our board is like 15. Like he's like 20th on our board. And all of a sudden those guys start falling down the media boards because they're hearing from guys inside the league that, we're too high on this guy. And so they need to start falling off. I think that I'm starting to get a sense of that about Kyle Hamilton. It is interesting. You talked about
he ran a 4.72, I believe, in his 40-yard dash at his Notre Dame pro day, and I think that's a big reason why everyone's saying right. It was something really bad. I believe. But now people were talking about Notre Dame has a slower track, and there's other things that could play into that. And does that really does that really matter? In the long run. Now he has a 4.59 at the combine. So
he ran at the I see at the
combine. That's the number that I think everyone should hold to. But people saw that number and were like, oh, he can't be a safety and run a 4.72. I agree. Like that is an alarming. Alarming number there. But I'm sticking to the 4.59, which is why I think he's still going really high. But if by say any chance that he fell outside of the top 12, I do think the Steelers should be looking at, what if we had the best safety pair in the NFL, maybe of all time? And maybe if they go and get Tyrann Mathieu, the greatest safety trio of all time, if you could get a guy like that. And again, I'm just being ridiculous with that estimation. But
trade Minka and go get Malik Willis.
Okay.
Chris, you might be honest on that.
No, we're not doing that here.
Look, Locked On Steelers, you heard him say it.
No.
You wanted to get Tyrann Mathieu and Kyle Hamilton, trade away Minka, get Malik Willis.
No, we're not doing. No, stop it right now. You've heard me. I'm not even giving. I don't care about audio quality. We're just not having that. I kept saying no to just get mute. I'm gonna mute you in a second. That buddy. But if you're looking at Nick, and here's where it gets interesting. Say we get to the point where we were kind of at with Trevor, and realistically, let's say he doesn't fall down to 20 because the Saints are picking there, and there's other teams that could say, hey, Malik Willis, why not? Like the Texans pick at 13. Let's say they trade up to 12. Malik Willis gets outside of the top 10. 12, according to the Draft Tech board, is 1,200 is 1,200 points. Oddly enough, and that means the Steelers would then need 350 points. So then all you're talking about is really just trading your second round pick this year, trading a third round pick. Then you're in an interesting spot there where, as far as I still see that this is the year where if they sit firm at 20, they will either get a really good corner, a really good safety, a really good they could double up, or they can go and dip back into the offensive line. They could pick one of those cornerbacks, or they can get one of those really good defensive tackles. And I think all of those possibilities are worth not trading up for this year, and then using that second round pick to say, hey, well, we need a wide receiver. Let's go get one of those Sky Moore's, Christian Watson types. Oh, we missed out on defensive tackle. Let's see if Travis Jones is hanging around, and using this year's draft to fill out the roster so that next year, when you're in that NFL draft class next year, and everyone wants to talk about Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, I always bring up Brennan Armstrong. There's Phil Jacobich from Boston College who might be there. Next year's class is going to be completely different at the quarterback position. I think much higher heralded and respected. And will mean that it will cost more to move up, but you'll be in a better position to do so because you won't be scrambling around all year long, all this draft to figure out everything, because this is really the draft that you solidified your defensive line, your wide receiver position, your cornerback room, and made sure that your safety room is good. Tony, hold on. I know you got a thought on that.
Counterpoint when we get back.
And I want the counterpoint, because I love our going back and forth. But first, I got to tell these people about one of our greatest sponsors, Built Bar. Y'all know, it's April. The weather's starting to get right, and you want to make sure that you're feeling right. And if you had your New Year's resolution, you should be sticking to it. And the easy way to stick to it is by eating Built Bars. They're the tasty treats that are so good for you, and you'll actually enjoy eating. If you haven't tried the new puff flavors, you're missing out, because they're some of the best tasting Built Bars around. A puff flavor of Built Bar is a protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, marshmallowy, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in so many flavors like cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, and all many more. And if you want to get a regular Built Bar, which isn't the puff flavor, you're in luck, because there's so many great flavors of those as well. Also covered in 100% real chocolate, they pack just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, compared to the average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. That means you're eating a treat that's low calorie but high in protein. Perfect for helping you stick to your diet plan. And again, with Built Bars, there's so many flavors: double chocolate, coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, raspberry, salted caramel, mint brownie. Your choice can be your favorite Built Bar delivered right to your door by going to built.com and using the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order when you visit built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Tony Serino of the AFC North Talk podcast. Tony, your rebuttal to my point as far as talking about, looking at some of those other position players and settling for that in this year's draft to fill out the roster.
Yeah, no, look, the Steelers, if they stay at 20, this is a good draft class. They're going to get a good player. I think you mentioned all the right positions: defensive back, linebacker, defensive tackle, or something on the defensive line. All of those are needs for this team, and it would be good for their long-term future. But, when we start talking about the quarterback position, at some point, this team needs to address it in the long term, right? We talk about, whether it's this year or next year. Next year's class is very top-heavy, right? I was tank commander for Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. But the issue is, and this goes back to the podcast you guys did yesterday, the issue with next year's class that I have is that those top two guys are starting to feel a little out of reach for me when I project to 23. Mm-hmm. CJ Stroud and Bryce Young are likely going to be 1 and 2, and you have so many teams in next year's class that are that have multiple first round picks. They're going to have more ammunition than the Steelers can have to go up. And you're right to say that, look, there's going to be other guys. There's not going to be a 2 quarterback class. But I think that the problem I have is, when we just ignore this class that go to next year, I think we've talked down this class so much because people are right. There is no QB1 in this class. In fact, there's really not even a QB2, right? If you look at the top guy in this class, Malik Willis, I would have had him as the 3rd best quarterback in last year's class. He would have been QB3. In fact, Seth Galina he does a podcast called Too High, which he said this. He's like, this is the perfect description of the class. Everyone's QB3. Now you have a bunch of guys in this class who are like, well, the traits some of their traits aren't great. And the one guy whose traits are great has so far to go as far as, the mental part of the game and the offense that it comes from. And you just worry about whether or not his game translates to the National Football League because the offense that he played in was so simplified. But to me, look, Malik Willis would have, if he would have been the 3rd best quarterback in last year's class, the 3rd best quarterback in last year's class was number 3 overall. So if you're telling me that I can get that guy this year at number 10 or number 12 even, look, I'm willing to go up and get that. Because, again, I think what we're talking about, QB3 is still, in my eyes, a franchise guy.
But see, here's the thing. Different QB3 is different every year. There's no guarantee that a QB3, QB3 in 2004 was Ben Roethlisberger. QB3 in 2013 was Geno Smith. And it's but I'm more talking about QB3, the archetype, right? Because if you think about QB1 is generally he's got all the traits and, he was a highly productive player. He's got all the accolades. Generally, QB1, we're not just talking about him in relation to the other members of his class, right? It's like the Andrew Luck, the Trevor Lawrence, right? The guy who, Joe Burrow. We're comparing him among other QB1s. QB2 is like a step down from that. And then QB3 in most classes
is the guy who's like, well, he's very developmental. He's got some traits, but you worry about certain, Josh Allen was QB3. Pat Mahomes was QB3.
Yes.
That's the kind I'm talking about. And I don't think
also should be Pat Mahomes was QB3 because one Mitch Trubisky was picked second overall when everyone was like, I don't know about that one.
Well, yeah, right. No, but go back and look at the rankings that year. I mean, Mitch Trubisky was QB1 on a lot of boards that year.
Not on mine.
Yeah.
But to your point, let's look QB3s over the past several years. Last year, Trey Lance. Year before that, Justin Herbert.
Right.
If you were telling me the Steelers are getting Justin Herbert with QB3, I would not complain for a second. I'd be like, oh, sign me up.
Yeah.
2019, Dwayne Haskins. Funny enough, the Steelers already have that. 2018, like you said, Josh Allen. But I think also if you look back at that year, you'd probably, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold going off in the first 3 picks before Josh Allen seems like a major mistake in review.
Well, that whole class was like just
all over the place.
Evaluation. Yeah.
Super backwards. 2017, it was Deshaun Watson who was QB3. 2016 was Paxton Lynch. Funny enough, the Steelers end up with a lot of these guys.
They do. That's why they like Malik.
That's why. And then it starts to get weird. 2015 was Garrett Grayson, but he was picked in the 3rd round. 2014 was Teddy Bridgewater. 13 was Mike Glennon, and then we start to get into obscurity. But point being, there are draft classes where that is. I'm just not so sure. Like the QB3 this year for me is Desmond Ridder. Is he worth trading up for?
Well, but Desmond Ridder would be. Where would you put Desmond Ridder in last year's class, right? Because again, this is. I'm not talking about the 3rd best quarterback in the class. I'm talking about like the archetype of a guy who's generally the 3rd best quarterback. Like Justin Herbert, it was QB3 that year because Burrow was the this is the prototypical. We can build around this guy. Tua was a little lower than that. Remember, tank for Tua was a thing until he had all the hip injury stuff.
Yeah.
And then Herbert was, we're not. He's got a huge arm, but man, you never see it on the field, and we're not sure how much of his game is going to translate. Right, that's generally, this year's class has a bunch of those guys where, you look at Ridder and you're like, okay, athletic profile is good, but like he never shows it on the field. Arm is decent enough, goes through processing well enough, right? But like none of that stuff really stands out. I think all of these guys would be QB3 in a lot of those classes we just went through. To me, though, Malik Willis is like the best of the bunch, and I'm willing to take my chances on a guy who has all the traits and just a bunch of question marks about, can he ever reach that ceiling? He has a limitless ceiling. I don't care what his floor is, and that's what draws me to Malik.
To answer your question, if I was to rank Desmond Ridder in last year's class, I would go Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. I'd throw Malik Willis along with Trey Lance, and then I would start getting to Desmond Ridder alongside, Zach Wilson, Matt Jones, and that crew, who I would all put above still Matt Corral and Sam Howell.
Sam Howell.
Yeah, poor Sam Howell. Fine later in the draft, not fine in the 1st round. But point being, I want to finish strong here. Tony, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you're sitting there and let's say the Panthers have either selected Kenny Pickett or just didn't take a quarterback at all.
Yeah.
And like you said, 7th overall, looking at the chart, the Giants are sitting there before the Falcons, the Seahawks, Washington, Houston, and the Saints getting 2 picks. There's a lot of options that can step before the Steelers. How do you pull the trigger to get your guy, Malik Willis? Because you say it's Malik no matter what.
Malik Willis no matter what. This would be a good way to end the show. Do you want to know what I gave? So we did this on AFC North Talk.
You did a mock draft.
We did a mock draft.
Oh.
I told Sonny, pause the draft at 7 if the Panthers don't take quarterback and Malik Willis is still there at 7, I want to trade up with the Giants. He paused it. I said, offer them. And here's what I gave up, Chris. You ready for this?
No.
I gave up not 1, but 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick. Let's go. Oh. You can't give up enough for my boy Malik Willis.
Maserati Malik.
It was too much. You've
already said. You just said now it was too much.
It was too much, but you can't give up enough. No, I think look, what I hope. Here's what I hope. Here's where I sit today as we record this on whatever it is, April 5th. I hope the Steelers, if the Steelers are going to take a quarterback in this class, I hope they trade up to do it. Because again, I said this last week when we were doing the show. I want them to take the quarterback that they love. I don't want them to settle for the quarterback that they like. And I worry that the Steelers are going into this class knowing they have this hole at quarterback of who are we going to have our quarterback of the future. There's all these guys who are like, he's the 20th pick. It wouldn't be that big a deal. And I worry that's where we're going to end up. And so I'd rather see them. Yeah, you're going to trade away some future assets. He might be a bust. Any quarterback you take in the first round could be a bust. So has a 50% hit rate at the position. I'd rather they go up, get the guy they love, than settling for the guy that they like.
I hear you on that. And it also kind of makes sense because I've seen people make the point. Teams that wait for quarterbacks in the back end of the first round usually don't work out. When you look at recent years or second round picks like Kyle Trask with the Buccaneers, no one's expecting much out of him. Jordan Love hasn't worked out great for the Packers, though I will say Jalen Hurts I think is looking better than a lot of people projected him to look for the Eagles, and there's at least potential there. Granted, yeah. I think it's not potential that will preclude them from looking for a future quarterback down the line. Drew Lock in the second round didn't work out for the Broncos. Now the Seahawks are trying him out. I think one of maybe the shining example of this working out in your favor is Lamar Jackson to the Ravens. But again, that's a small sample size. So to Tony's point, if the Steelers are that confident about Malik Willis and they don't want to wait to the back end of the first round or just 20th overall to go get their guy, whether it's Desmond Ridder or someone else because Malik Willis is gone, I feel you, Tony, and I'm not saying that someone would be stupid for doing it. It's just not the move that I think would be best for their current plan. I still think that the best path forward for the Steelers to get back to being Super Bowl contenders is this year. Make your running game as beastie as you can. Make your defense as beastie as you can, which means in that first round, get a defensive star. Solidify your defensive line now and for the future with Devontae Wyatt type of player, or get your CB1 if one of those guys fall, or get a star safety, make a 3-safety package with whether you get Tyrann Mathieu or Terrell Edmonds as your other strong safety. Make it so that you have a really good young piece that's going to be a butt kicker on that. I'm quoting my guy Jim Wexel because he's been using that phrase all off season long, but they need a butt kicker on defense. And then next year, once you use the second round pick to go get another lineman or a wide receiver and you draft that up, next year your roster is more solidified. You don't have nearly as many holes as you do this year. And then next year you say, you know what? Our roster looks good. Let's get aggressive. We'll trade the farm and go get one of those quarterbacks that's Bryce Young / CJ Stroud / whoever is at the top of the list next year.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out real quick before we go, because you mentioned there, like, we got to get a safety. The Steelers are going to get a safety potentially in the draft, but they probably should get one in free agency as well to start.
Yeah.
I will make this point. The last time they had this glaring need at safety was 2017, 2018, whenever they took Edmonds. I mean, they just didn't have a player to play that spot. And then they ended up waiting until the draft and they ended up getting Edmonds. If the Steelers don't take a quarterback at 20, I do think safety to me is becoming more and more likely as the days tick by, and Edmonds hasn't signed, Matthew hasn't signed. The Steelers have this glaring need. You look at all the top safeties in the class, they visited all of them. Kyle Hamilton, they visited. Louis Cine, they visited. Cine, whatever you pronounce it. Cine. Mm-hmm. And then Daxton Hill. All three of those guys, they've seen them up close and personal.
And Jaquan Brisker, who is from Pittsburgh / Monroeville. That people get testy about that. But point being, I agree with you. Between Hamilton, Brisker, Hall, and Cine, all four, I'd be like, you know what? Wouldn't be mad at that 20th overall. And I've been saying all offseason long, I think a 3-headed monster at safety, whether it's Edmonds, and because Minka is the first head of your monster right there. Mm-hmm. Edmonds is a good piece that you can use, that he can help erase tight ends. He can help with coverage over the middle. He's not elite by any means, but he's solid. And then you draft another guy in the first round who you think has a good chance to become elite or become a guy that's really your number 2 safety behind Minka, while Terrell Edmonds is that filler veteran guy. You could disguise so many coverages with that. I've been saying this for months here, looking at the safety class, and I really think that's a move that the Steelers should consider. But to your point, Tony, trading up isn't out of the realm of possibility, and Malik Willis might not be. I think that I don't think that they'll do it, but we will see moving forward. Tony, thanks so much for joining us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know you find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Steeler Country, and you can find me on AFC North Talk. It's a roundtable show all about the AFC North. We're going to be live tonight. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, give us a look. We'll be talking about the draft and some free agency stuff on AFC North Talk on YouTube.
And if you want to check out more of the Locked On Steelers podcast, if you like the video version you're watching here, you found it on YouTube. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily content and our breaking news updates. If you want the audio version, you go to Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Odyssey, or anywhere podcasts are hosted. We appreciate everyone who does that. And if you want to help out the show even further, go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review along with a positive comment. You do both at the same time. When it registers, we sees it, you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again to my man Tony. We'll be back with more tomorrow for the Thursday edition of the Locked On Steelers podcast on your Pittsburgh Steelers.